What do we get for whose graph passes through the 3 points? We can also say quadratic model / regression, because on the calculator it says regression. So our final answer will be in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. And you'll either need to write f of x equals, or you also could put y equals. But when you do a quadratic model, it has to be an equation. It can't just be an expression. All right, so here is our first question. Find a quadratic model that includes the variables in the table. So you might remember doing this with our linear stuff. We're going to press the stat button. Stat is in the middle, second down from the top, underneath the delete button. Stat right here. We're going to press the edit button. Now you may have stuff typed in there from last time. We can, remember, you can clear out by arrowing up to the column. Never hit delete. You do not want to delete L2, you want to clear, and you'll have to hit enter after you hit clear. And then we're going to input the x values into our L1 and the y values into your L2. You do need to make sure they go in the correct column. Is anyone missing L1 or L2? Does anyone have like L1 and then L3? No? So, whoops. Input your data. So 3, 4, 3, 13, 29, not 39. All right, and then just like we did in the past, we're going to go back and press the stat button again. Arrow over to calculate. And in the past, we've chosen option 4 for linear regression. We're going to choose option 5 for quadratic regression. So choose 5 or arrow down to 5. Remember, it'll take you back to your home screen. It doesn't run the program until you hit enter again. And it will give you an A, a B, and a C value. It also should give you an R squared because we turned our diagnostics on. But you really don't need that for these problems. So all you have to do is take the A, the B, and the C and plug them into the y equals. Okay, so we should be getting that A equals 3, B is -5, and C is 1. Therefore, the equation would be y equals 3x squared minus 5x plus 1. You have to write the y equals. Some of you I know will forget this on your quiz. You can also put f of x equals. It doesn't matter as long as it's an equation. You could also be like g of x, h of x, whatever, but it has to be an equation. So pretty easy. The next one's similar, but they've given us a set of ordered pairs instead of a table. So you might want to create a table. So 1, 0 would be 1 is the x, 0 is the y, 2, -3, and 3, -10. Go ahead and run that in your calculator. And then same thing we're used to doing, we're going to press stat, calculate, option 5 this time for a quadratic regression, and you're going to see a whole bunch of numbers. Okay, so we're going to have to round these numbers to write our equation, so that we don't have to write out every single decimal. Again, let's do the nearest thousandth, so let's go ahead and do 3 decimal places just to be a little bit more accurate. So I'll get y equals 0.589 x squared plus 0.335x minus 0.332. 3316, the 6 would round the 1 to be a 2. Okay, the r squared value you can see is close to 1, but it's not 1, which means this isn't a perfect fit. If you remember how we had like a strong positive, strong negative. There aren't strong positive or negative correlations here, but they will tell you how close that the fit is. So for 1, it's exactly a perfect fit. If it's close to 1, it's pretty close. All right, now to graph this. If you remember, the graphing keys are all on the top row. You could go type this in. However, if you type this in, this is rounded, right? This is not accurate. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to get the calculator to take this and put it in our calculator for us. Okay? So let's go ahead and press Well, let's press our y equals button first, because we might have something typed in there. Let's clear it out. See if you have anything typed in. You might have something typed in y1 and y2. Get rid of anything you have in there. All right, we're also going to turn on our plots. So when we talked about scatter plots before, where we'd see little plots, you'll see that right above the y equals it says stat plots, which is your scatter plot that's associated with whatever you put in for the stat button. So press second y equals. You should see that they're all turned off right now. Okay, we want to turn them on. So press enter, and press enter again until it's bold and blinking on the on. So again, all I did was I pressed second y equals, pressed enter, and I turned my plots on. Everyone with me so far? We are going to want to turn these off when we're done with them, because you don't want your scatter plots showing up all the time, just when you need them. And then you'll see that it says L1 and L2, which that's where we put our data in, so that makes sense. All right. So now we're going to go back, and I'm actually going to jot down some notes for this one. So whenever we do this, we're going to do what we normally do. We're going to do our stat calculate. And we are going to choose 5 for our quadratic regression. But before we hit enter, we're going to also type something after that. We're going to type in L1, comma, L2, comma, and then we'll need to put in Y1 after this. Now to get L1 on the calculator, you'll press second, let me double check this, and the 1 key. You'll see that second 1 is the L1. To get L2, you'll press second and the 2 key. You'll see L2 is right above it. And then for the Y1, you're going to press the vars key, which stands for variables. Okay, you want to write this down in your notes. So once we press, let me just double check this before I write it down. We'll press the vars key, we'll arrow over to Y vars. I'm going to come back and do this again, but I'm just making sure I'm giving you the right steps on here. Sometimes I just do it without thinking. So we'll arrow over to Y vars, and then you'll hit function, and then that's where Y1 is. See, I told you some of you are going to get a little overwhelmed right now. Let's start. All right, so let's go back. Actually, I want to go to my home screen. So let me just hit second mode. If you guys ever get stuck in a screen, the quit key gets you out. So if you press second mode, it takes you back to your home screen. And I'm going to clear out my home screen. So just get a nice clean home screen for us to start with. So again, we're going to go back. We already have our data put in. We're going to do the quad reg, but we're not going to hit enter. We're going to type in a couple things after that. So stat, arrow over to calculate, choose option 5 for quadratic, but do not hit enter. Okay, so we're going to have our quad reg, and then we're going to type in our L1, so second L1. Now you do have to press a comma between these two things. The comma is right above the 7. So L1. Okay, the new calculators, it's probably going to pop up for you. So you won't have to do this. So you'll have L1, L2, and then your store equation, that's where you're going to do the vars. So you just have to do, anyone else have the new calculator? So the new calculator, yours is going to pop up after you quad reg, and it's going to say like L1, L2. Then it'll say store equation. That's where you're going to press the vars key and follow those steps. So you get to skip typing those out because it does it for you. But you'll have to press the vars key and do all of this where it says store required equation. And then, so maybe just hang on and we'll get there in a second. So now we'll press our L2 for everyone else. Another comma. And then anyone with the new calculator, this is what you're going to do in the store required part. So we're going to press the vars key, which is right here. It's underneath the down arrow. We're going to arrow over to Y vars. We want the functions, and we choose Y1. Okay, now hit enter. Okay, it looks like it did the same thing, right? Or like we already got this. Why are we doing this again? If you go to your y equals button now, ta-da, it's been typed in for us without rounding any numbers and without having to retype in every single decimal. Write them down and then copy them over. Okay, so what this does is it stores it in there for you. All right, so now when we graph it, it's not a rounded equation, it's going to be exactly precise. So let's go ahead and do, when you do the graph, if you just press graph right now, there's a good chance you're not going to see anything. Try it. Press graph. But it just looks like a bold X and Y axis. Okay. So, and yours might look different because of how you zoomed in last time, Sam?
Yeah,
It worked for you?
yeah, there's a good.
Okay.
I got an error.
Everyone's going to be different because it's however you had your picture, whatever you looked at last. If it doesn't work, you're going to press the zoom key, or even just try the zoom key and see if you can get a better picture. We've been using the stat button a lot, right? There's a zoom for stat. If you arrow down or if you arrow up, zoom 9 says zoom stat. So it will zoom to wherever the data values that you put in the stat menu are. So if you press zoom 9, that usually gives you a nice, beautiful picture. So you can see your scatter plots. You can see the curve going through that. So we're going to sketch that on our paper as best we can. Again, it's just going to be a little sketch. Bless you. Now we're also going to use this model to estimate something, and you'll remember when you estimate you just have to plug in for X. So we're going to do it two different ways. Use the model to estimate the wave speed of a deep water wave that has a wavelength. Wavelength was our X, so we're saying when the wavelength is 6, so when X equals 6, we're finding out what does Y equal. Alright, now the way that most of you are going to do this typically is you're going to take the X and you're going to plug it back in to the rounded equation. Okay, our answer is going to be slightly off, but it's going to get us an answer nonetheless. So if you were doing this, you would have y equals 0.589 times 6 squared plus 0.335 times 6 minus 0.332. And then obviously we're typing that in our calculator, not doing it longhand. And I'll just tell you what you get when we do this. We would get 22.882, and that would be in meters per second based on how the y variable was. Okay. Now, I also want to show you what we would get if we use the graphing calculator's answer without rounding to show you the difference in answers. It's not drastic, but if you were doing some sort of mathematical problem when you graduate college, such as engineering, you wouldn't want to be having a rounding error. You'd want to be exact. So let me just show you the difference. Let's go back to our graphing calculator. So if you want to find a value on this equation, there's two things that you can do. We could go to the table and look for the x and see where the y value. So everyone press second table. This is different than your stat table. Stat's where you input your own values. The table is calculated based on what you put in the y equals. Do you see the difference between the stat table and this table? So if you want, just scroll down to x, or excuse me, 6, and you'll see 22.892. Okay, and this was using the graphing calculator. On your homework, I don't care which one you do. Most of you will probably just plug it in by hand. Some of you will actually like this because then you don't have to type that in your calculator. You can just store it. Especially with the new calculator, it's much easier to store it than it is on the manual calculators. I don't care which one you do. Now, the other way you can do this, go back to your graph. Okay, everyone press graph again. If you don't like the table, you can actually calculate the value. So if you press second and trace, there's a lot of options here. You can calculate a value. So hit enter on value, and you get to type in whatever x value you want. So like if you wanted to find what 6.25 is, this is where you'd want to do it because that's not going to be in your table. But we would just type in 6 hit enter, and it will tell you what the y value is. And then this one, you can see that it actually goes out a little bit further, 89196, which we would round to 89.892. We can see that that gets a little more accurate. All right, so again, for those of you starting to get a little bit stressed, remember that this part, you don't have to do, well, let's say this part. This part and this part, you don't have to do on your own. If you would like, on the homework, you can just find the rounded answer and use the rounded equation to find the value of your predicted model. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's turn off all the stuff on our calculator that we might have turned on. Because at some point in the year, some of you won't turn it off right now, and then you'll come up to me on a test and be like, I'm getting an error on my test. And it's because your stat plots are still on. So you have to turn off your plots. So press second, y equals. You have to turn off your plots whenever you want to do regular problems again. So hit enter, arrow over to the off button. You have to hit enter again until it's solid on off and blinking on off. And then we can just quit. To get out of this menu, we press second mode, and we're out of there. So now that your plots are off, and you don't have to have them on to do this part. I just did it so that when we graphed it, we actually saw it. You do not have to turn the stat plots back on at all if you want to use the graphing calculator model. All right, let's go ahead and skip the closure. Let's do this one as our closure. Now the only thing different about this is that instead of giving you a table of values or a set of ordered pairs, they've given you function notation. So remember, this is f of x equals something. So if you're doing this, that means that x is -2, the function gets us 16. So it's just another way of writing an ordered pair, basically. And when you plug in 0 for x, you get 0 for your y, 1, and 4. So you might see something like that on the homework. Go ahead and run that real quick with your calculator. So you should be getting really 4x squared. So you should be getting that a is 4, b is 0, and you should be getting that c is it -9.8?
Yeah.
-9.8, and in your calculator it probably says e -13.
Yeah.
Okay, so remember, e -13 really means -9.8 times 10 to the -13th power. This is scientific notation. If I were to expand and braid out this number, I'd have to move my decimal place over 13 times. I'm going to go off the board. Look how small this number is. It's -0.00000, a lot of zeros, 98. So anytime you see that, you are going to approximate that this is approximately 0. So you don't have to write out that number. Okay, because if we were to round to the nearest 3 decimal points, it would be rounding to 0 anyways. So it really would be just y equals 4x squared plus 0x plus 0, which can just be dropped off. Good, I'm glad I put that in the notes, because you'll get that on the homework. That'll show up on the homework. So when it does, just assume that those are zeros. All right, the rest of the time is